All right, welcome to NFL Outdated Cover 2 series. This episode, we are talking about the New Orleans Saints, and I am joined by Chris Connor from the Canal Street Chronicles. How's it going?
Man, it's excellent, man. I'm happy to be on, man. I see a lot of the work and the following that you guys have over there, man. So it's I'm excited to. Well, I'm more excited than I thought I would be talking about my team not being in the playoffs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a Bears fan, so I'm kind of used to that. But it is.
I live in Chicago, so I understand.
Oh yeah. Oh, very nice.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, crazy weekend of playoff football. Obviously, wish the Saints were there. They had an opportunity, and if they would have gotten there, it might have been a different story with how they've played the Bucks. But so let's just kind of go get right there. I mean, the 2021 season. Give me a review, and then how about that tough ending?
Yeah, man. It was just a year full of adversity. And at one point, it just became too many things to overcome, right? You start off, you're playing a home game in Jacksonville, right, against the Green Bay Packers, right, the team that ends up finishing with the best team with the best record in the NFC. So you start off there, and look, they win, right? But you have no Michael Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
Alvin Kamara is being run to the ground. The offensive line is banged up, and just injuries and COVID almost every single piece of their team at some point at one part of the year was missing. It just, I mean, they may not have been missing collectively, but they were out at some point. You're missing both Ryan Ramczyk and Teron Armstead for periods of time, and then when they're there, maybe Eric McCoy's not there, your center. And then, you can't find a tight end. And then when one does play well, he gets hurt. You don't have enough receivers or quality receivers that throw out there. Jameis Winston is doing his best to make do with what's there. And, they're starting to play some good football. And then in the game that it was a litmus test of sorts. Jameis playing against his former team. He starts off pretty well. I mean, he wasn't throwing the ball well through the air as much, but he was making things happen with his leg. And then he gets hurt, and it changes a lot of thoughts about the season. At that point, we didn't know Michael Thomas was going to miss the year, but there are thoughts that a lot of people believe that the Saints would have had a better opportunity to trade for Odell Beckham if I'm sorry, not trade for Odell Beckham, but him signing with New Orleans had Jameis been there. And you could be talking about a team that was maybe in the hunt for sure division crown, if not a higher seed in the NFC. So just across the board, Cam Jordan gets off to a rough start. He has a really good second half. I mean, man, there was a game where they were missing like 5 different position coaches. The third string quarterback, Ian Book, is doing substitutions. But then later on in the year, he's starting a game again, which ended up hurting him at the end against the Miami Dolphins, right?
Right.
So I just at the end of the day, it came down to the last game, and then even that didn't go well. I look at my phone, the Rams are up 17-3 going to halftime. I'm like, damn, the Saints, they're gonna mess around and make the playoffs. I look back at 17-17, and if you followed the way that game ended, it looked like the Rams were still gonna find a way to win, and they didn't. Mm-hmm. And now, ironically, the two teams are going to meet in the NFC Championship game. So, I mean, overall, man, they just had too many things to overcome, and somehow ended up finishing 9-8, and were right there through everything that they had to go through. I mean, it's unbelievable all the different starters they had to throw out there, and what Sean Payton and that coaching staff and those players had to go through. So, I mean, I think that I can't think of anything but really positivity coming from that, because most teams would have crumbled under those circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw there was like they started a record number of players this year. I know it was like 56. It was something in that range, and it just it's crazy to think that they were in good position to be in the playoffs, and had they made it, they some reason have Tom Brady's number. I mean, is it that defense, the coaching staff, Sean Payton, or what is that?
It's a mixture, but I mean it's out there. I mean, you saw some of it today, against the Rams. If you're able to pressure that offensive line and pressure Tom Brady with your front four. And we've seen it throughout his career, dating back to those, to those Super Bowl losses against the Giants and some of the things that they were able to do. If you can pressure Tom Brady with just rushing forward without having to send extra men, you normally put yourself in a good situation. And the Saints have look, man, they have a talented defense. I mean, at every level, they have a really talented, Pro Bowl worthy, all pro worthy player. I mean, the secondary, you have Marshawn Lattimore who plays Mike Evans really well. You got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson as a slot corner, as a slot safety, but plays in the box. You got Marcus Williams on the back end. They drafted well with Parsons and Debo, and they traded for Bradley Roby on that end. Defensive line, Cam Jordan, David Onyemata, Marcus Davenport, banged up and all, had his best year as a pro. And the list goes on and on in regards to talent, Quan Alexander and company. So they're smart. They have veterans in the right position. They're talented. They're fast. They have flexibility. And that's just a lot for what Brady normally likes to do. And they can get after him with just their front four. And that causes him issues. And offensively, they just find a way to not turn the ball over. And like you saw the Rams do today, helping them get back into the game, just silly turnovers, untimely fumbles. That's one thing that they have found a way to not do in these big games outside of that that playoff game in a divisional round dating back to last year, where they would dominate that game for a good portion of time outside of the turnover. So, it's just one of those things. They have the right talent base, and they give a lot of teams, even outside of Brady, a lot of elite teams trouble. And that's, is the way that it should be when you have those kind of guys, if they're out there healthy and you can rush the passer without having to send extra help.
Yeah, it's so interesting. The identity of the Saints for so long has been the offense, and the defense has just been horrible. Score points. But now obviously the identity is shifted. With all those solid players that you talked about there. Are there any that they're going to lose going into 2022, or things that they may need to kind of shore up or anything like that?
Dog, when it comes to Mickey Loomis and that front office and how they are able to manipulate the salary cap, it's tough for me to tell you who they're going to lose. Last year was supposed to be hell for them. They weren't supposed to recover, and they lost. They lost Janoris Jenkins, which I think was someone that they could have used in different areas, throughout the year, different spots. You never want to lose a guy like that. They wanted to find a way to keep him. But there were other cap casualties that they were supposed to have. They were very thin on the defensive line, defensive tackle, and things were supposed to struggle there. Didn't really happen 100%, but they weren't. But they weren't able to address the wide receiver position maybe as they wanted to. Jared Cook had to be one of those cap casualties that I think even outside of how his year ended, I think that there were some people in that room that wanted to end up keeping him. So yeah, man. Yeah, I think that they have an interesting decision with Marcus Williams. He's up for a contract extension. We'll see if they go the franchise tag route or what. Because, I think ultimately, the goal for them is going to be to figure out what they're doing with the quarterback position. And everybody has their eyes on, what they're going to do if it's going to be a guy like Russell Wilson. If they'll trade for an Aaron Rodgers, will they go the Deshaun Watson route? Or will they bring back Jameis? But what they decide there will shape everything else. If you're able to sign Jameis, they'll be able to restructure some things and free up some cap space to go out and make a play for a receiver. Maybe they'll draft one. Mike Thomas will return. Maybe they go out and get a tight end. There's a bunch of ways that they can go. And then, we're talking about a situation where you can restructure Marcus Williams and extend him. But that's where I'm looking at. They're young. They're young in a lot of places. I don't think people see. Even with Malcolm Jenkins, you have solid guys behind him. They're real. They're good at cornerback. Marshawn Lattimore was only 25 years old. Cam Jordan's up there, in age, but you drafted Peyton Turner in the first round last year next to Marcus Davenport if he's healthy. So, I think that their ability to draft in some of the really strong classes that they've had, especially later in rounds, has put them in a situation to where they can maybe make or take some risks that the average team wouldn't be able to. But if there is a guy that I would you could question if they will they end up losing. Marcus Williams is the one that people are talking about the most right now.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about taking risks as well, and you talked about the quarterback position. Jameis Winston in past had gotten in trouble for taking a lot of risks, and he had a solid season when he was playing. Did he show enough? Do you think to you like the fans and maybe the front office in the time that he played that he would get another shot?
I mean, believe it or not, man, there's a lot of people that would rather, like in the fan base, that would rather Jameis Winston than Russell Wilson. I can't believe it. I can't.
Right.
But I mean, I understand some of it, right? Because he's not going to be cheap to acquire, right?
Mm-hmm.
So some people, may look at it and say, all right, well, maybe James is coming off a knee injury. You're going to pay him, but you're not going to pay him Russell Wilson money. You don't have to trade anything to get him. If you put the right weapons around him, look at Jimmy Garoppolo in San Francisco right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
They put a good team around him, a bunch of different weapons. The defense is is solid, talented in a bunch of different areas, and they're one game away from a Super Bowl now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a game in which they have a real legitimate chance of winning.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, man, I think that there's a real argument there for Jameis. He played well, and everybody makes there's we talk about the decision making and what he tried to change and what he didn't change. But look, man, I mean, the leadership skills were there, but the question that people, I think, you want to ask is that there's still some uncertainty there. Sean Payton has been in this game for a long time. He got a chance to coach Drew Brees for good, 90% of his coaching tenure, and he got a chance to win a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Does he still, after the year that he went through this year, does he want to have to worry about anything uncertain at that position, developing or transition versus you plug in a Russell Wilson, you plug in some of these, Pro Bowl, All Pro, Super Bowl caliber winning quarterbacks right away, and you know exactly what you're getting. I don't know if Sean wants to deal with that. Maybe if he didn't have to deal with Trevor Siemian and Taysom Hill and Ian Book and the different carousel that happened this year, maybe he look at it differently. But I would assume that unless this roster from the wide receiver position, unless they're able to bring back pretty much everybody and make some some changes, some quirks here, and upgrade the offensive weapons, I think that you would best serve your head coach, who isn't young anymore, right? You would best serve him by going out and getting one of those quarterbacks that will be or more likely should be available, that you have the assets to go and acquire.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you talked about Taysom Hill, and a couple questions on that. Does just the presence of Taysom Hill, number one, hamper what Jameis Winston can do, and number two, why is Sean Payton so enamored with Taysom Hill?
Well, I mean, I think part of it's ego, right? He found. I mean, listen, man, he's a Parcells guy, and I mean, if you know anything about that tree, from Belichick, to Payton and company, like it's like those guys have egos, man, and they love being able to prove they love being able to prove someone wrong. They love being able to say that they found something and put it out there, right? I think Taysom was a lot with what Sean thought he was going to be able to be around a lot longer with Tony Romo back in Dallas, who ironically, before the Saints even went and got Drew, was who Sean wanted to be his quarterback, right? And then, Tony goes off to have a pretty good career with the Cowboys, so on and so forth. But I think that was, Drew, there was some, period where Sean and Drew had to learn, about each other. And, they started to get a rhythm and get, chemistry together as play caller and signal caller. But at the end of the day, Drew was proven already when he came to New Orleans. He came, he arrived there with back-to-back Pro Bowl seasons. He had been in the playoffs already. Taysom was one of those guys that he could, that he developed that nobody wanted, nobody heard of, nobody cared about. That Sean was able to help turn into a productive NFL player. And you go from there to say, okay, well, a few years in the system, maybe I can turn him into a productive quarterback because we know how dynamic of an athlete he is. And that's the ultimate allure there. As a weapon, he's able to bring you things in a multitude of positions that not many other teams have to, I guess, counter with, right? To throw out there game in and game out. And then when he's out there starting, if for say emergency, it's just the element of him running is just a headache that coaches have to prepare for and spend more time in meeting rooms than they would normally want to be. Because that was the biggest difference between him and Trevor Siemian. The games that they lost, what Siemian was out there simply had to do. It wasn't that Taysom was out there throwing the ball, better or doing things from a pocket perspective that Siemian wasn't. It's just that element of running changes how you have to prepare for him and how you have to play him. And that makes a difference. I mean, they scored 9 points in that game that they beat Tampa. 3 field goals. It was 9-0. It was terrible.
I'd say you kind of look at it. Yeah, I mean, you watch the Bills. We just watched the Bills Chiefs game, and Josh Allen does that. That running, and Patrick Mahomes does that. It has that element that you can cover down the field, but if there's that extra running element, I mean, that's just. I mean, they can have all the coverage in the world, but if they can, run 10, 20 yards down the field, or just some of these design runs that definitely can throw a defense off guard.
And listen, especially when you have weapons out there, right? Pat Mahomes is great. What he offers is, I mean, he's a generational talent, right? And in my opinion, will be representing the AFC, at another Super Bowl, right? But having Tyreek Hill, having Travis Kelce, having I mean, at this point, to me, it really doesn't matter who they have back there running back. But if they have, if they have Hilaire, if they're able to protect him, when you have McCole Hardman and Pringle and all these different guys that they can throw at you, Sammy Watkins in the past, I mean, it's a lot to deal with. It just, it adds to it, right? So same with Josh Allen. Greg Davis had 208 yards and 4 touchdowns today, man.
Yeah, Gabriel Davis just, and you account for Stephon Diggs, but you just don't account for him, or even Emmanuel Sanders throughout the year.
Right. Yeah. So that's different when Taysom Hill is throwing to Marquez Callaway, and the Buccaneers, for example, have 2 of the best linebackers in football when it comes to Devin White and Levante David at guarding guys like Alvin. It's hell, man. I mean, a banged up offensive line, but at the end of the day, it's a weird situation for Jameis and for Taysom because it's unfortunate that you weren't able to truthfully see them with talent on the outside or at the tight end position consistently. Some guys played above their pay grade towards the end of the year, but there's clear that they need upgrades there, and they've needed them for the last few years. That's what's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, they had Emmanuel Sanders at one point, right? And where do they go? Obviously Michael Thomas is still out there, but where do they go? Where the Saints go with their wide receiver core from here?
Well, I mean, I think number one, they have to. Sean has made Mickey and that front office. They have done a really good job at finding receiver talent, whether it be undrafted, whether it be late in rounds. They've done that, and I think that. Dating back to Marcus Colston in Sean's first year. And then, Marquez Callaway is another guy. They find Willie Snead. Like, they find productive receivers. They'll definitely find them. They drafted Brandon Cooks, which, Michael Thomas, right? But they need talent. So however you go and get it, if you draft it, if you have to go pay for it, because look, the NFL is flaky when it comes to wide receivers, man. When things aren't going well and they're on bad teams and bad situations, these guys are divas and problems. But you look at every team right now that is currently still alive, or that even played, that's been playing in the playoffs, they all have dynamic weapons or dynamic receivers. Every single one of them. Every single one of them. That's not by accident. So you definitely need talent there. Michael Thomas needed a co-star before he got hurt. He needed help before he got hurt. And Emmanuel was saying it was definitely help. But they can upgrade at the tight end position. They have to address those needs, especially if they want to bring a big-time quarterback here. Or if they decide to bring back Jameis or whatever the case may be. Get these guys weapons because your offensive line is going to be good. You have one of the best running backs in football. You have Mark Ingram for another year. You're going to be solid there. And you have one of the best play callers in the game. They've been needing help at that position even before this year. Dating back, past years Drew Brees or past years for Drew Brees. It's time. It's no longer time to take gambles on Ted Ginn or those kind of guys or guys at the end of it. No, go out and get actual talent because somehow, some way, the window is still open for this team to compete for a championship.
Yeah, you look at, players like Traquan Smith. He was supposed to be the number one, right? Or, is he just, have a certain ceiling to his talent? Or
he's a solid guy. He's a solid guy who can play, can play above what you're paying him, but it's still inconsistency. The guy was a 4th round pick, a 3rd round pick. He's not. He doesn't appear to be someone that's going to be Pro Bowl caliber or be a guy that's going to catch you 60 or 70 passes. And that's okay. He seems to be a role-playing wideout. He can make big plays in certain situations, and he did throughout the year. But for you to say, all right, he's going to be my number one and my number two, I don't think that's necessarily something you want to, drop on his head. He also has some injury, inconsistencies and concerns there. Look, Deontay Harris at some point, 5'6", 170 pounds. Deontay Harris was their best receiver at one point in time in this year. I'm sorry, that can't happen. So I think they have some talented guys there, Marquez Callaway. But if you can fit these guys in rows and spread them out, but you add one more talented guy. You sprinkle in another tight end that can give you some plays or, give you some splash plays every now and then, you'll be fine. But they can't keep gambling and hoping somebody steps up. They can't all fall on Michael Thomas and maybe one of these other guys will step. No, it's time to go out and really be, intentional about upgrading the position.
Yeah, and what about like Allen Robinson? Is he too much like Michael Thomas in what he does?
That's a good ass question.
Yeah, as a Bears fan, I'm definitely going to miss him. For whatever reason, he just didn't, click with Fields, and a lot of it was the play calling and whatnot as well, and not getting Fields a lot of play in training camp, but I don't see him obviously coming back to the Bears, so that might be a good fit.
I think Allen Robinson is a guy that statistically didn't come off of a great year, which is going to affect his market value, which may be a situation in which the Saints could put together a deal that's not going to break the bank to add him. That's a really good question in regards to because he is similar to Mike, but I don't think that matters at this point, man. Allen's a guy who when he's healthy, he's a good route runner, can create separation, good catch radius, can adjust in air. He just needs the right guy out there being able to get him the ball. And it's tough that no disrespect, man, but his quarterbacks have been in his entire career. It's been Blake Bortles to Mitch Trubisky, Nick Foles, and then Justin Fields. I hope that what the Saints are going to offer is a little bit better than that. And then, again, having that other guy, that other 1A next to you, and whatever else they add is going to be great because then you have specialty guys. Wherever you throw in Taysom is fine. Deontay is a speed guy. And then you can slide. If Traquan Smith or Marquez Callaway is your 4th best wide receiver, you're in a much better situation than having to beat number 2s and number 1 cornerbacks. That's just not the way to do it. But Allen Robinson, he would be a guy I would like to look at.
Yeah. And you talk about Michael Thomas. What are you hearing from his future? He was a little disgruntled as well, or what are you hearing about him?
I mean, there was definitely some frustration there, man. I think that there was some resentment. Listen, if they find a way to win last year, get to a Super Bowl, whatever the case may be, none of it really matters. But I think that the fact that everything was put on it being Drew Brees' last year, and Mike had a very serious injury that maybe needed more time that they could really give it. He felt rushed back. He came back, hurt himself again, then ended up coming back late in the year. Was never, according to him, and you could kind of see he wasn't really himself because I mean immediately he needed multiple surgeries. And then how he handled it after that, whatever the situation was with that, was definitely some resentment and some frustration I think at play. But look, man, I think now he did everything that he could do to get back and play for the team this year. And what they maybe should have done last year is what they end up doing this year. We tried to make it work. We tried to bring him back. We couldn't. It didn't work. The surgery took too long. Whatever the case may be, both sides could have did something better. We're gonna sit you out, and our focus with you is going to be number one on health. Um, like maybe there was a situation, a time, and I know some people say, well, Mike won't be there. They're gonna trade him. Trade him for what now? He hasn't played. He hasn't played football in a year and some change. So no one knows, and it's not like he's no longer 25, 24, man. I mean, he's inching. I believe he's inching very close to 30. For a guy who already isn't the most insane athlete when it comes to speed and lateral quickness and so on and so forth. He wins with techniques, routes, burst off the line, and his ability to catch the football. I mean, who's going out their way to trade for that, especially if they feel that there may be some some ego or some personality or some locker room issues, which I mean, from everything I heard, just really isn't the case. End of the day, man, Mike Thomas wants to play football. He cares about winning. He's a competitor. He's a nasty competitor. He's a little crazy. So I think what hurt him more than anything was just not being out there and having a chance to help the team because they needed him.
Absolutely. And speaking of kind of, someone not being out there, like you talk about Drew Brees and, what has, that just, I mean, not only on the field, but just like leadership wise, like missing Drew Brees. I mean, he was the identity, of the Saints for so long. I mean, what has that kind of been like?
Well, look, I mean, I think some other guys stepped up into leadership and, they have been kind of sharing that role, behind the scenes, like Cam Jordan, Alvin Kamara in different areas. Over time, some more talkative than others. Cam's more of a talker. Alvin really isn't, even though he has a pretty nice personality. He's not really a rah-rah type of dude consistently. Demario Davis, another guy who always brings it, who was taking over pregame huddles in different times when Drew wasn't available and when he was. Jameis took over the quarterback position from the summer and treated it like it was his. He brought guys out. He learned from Drew. So I think they were blessed with their ability there to where a guy like him leaving, it didn't fracture a unit, right? It didn't fracture a locker room because they had so many other individuals. Malcolm Jenkins, like they had a really good mixture of youth and veteran leadership that were already there to where you can't replace Drew, but it's not the same as if let's say when Peyton Manning left the Colts, right? It's simply just not the same. Or when Tom Brady leaves New England, there's not just a drop there. They were in a different situation. So, on the field, hey man, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. I mean, you can't replace his accuracy, you can't replace his precision, his timing, his communication, his fire, his leadership, his connection with Sean and being able to make certain things on the fly and 2-minute drills. You can't replace that. But I think they tried to really play with different identities this year. And at the end of the day, I think that they know what they can do going forward. But I really believe that they know next year they are going to need one way or another to upgrade their offense dramatically. And
absolutely,
if that's trading for a Russell Wilson, or, someone like that, then so be it. Or if that's adding around Jameis Winston, so be it. But I mean, the door is still open, and I mean that's a blessing considering a lot of people thought it would be over once Drew left.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you have a defense that gets you that close to the playoffs, and you have to do something to upgrade, you can't wait. And obviously, when you have a talent, on at the running back position, with Alvin Kamara, I mean, they've obviously really leaned on him. Talk about kind of maybe the wear and tear on him, and then how much better it was when Ingram was back.
Man, it was good for so many different reasons, man. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we talked about leadership. Ingram's another guy, like another
Mm-hmm.
another leader, another guy that he just gravitates to people. And Alvin and Mark have been, they've been completely honest since the day Ingram left about how close they are, how close they would be. So Mark returned and was able to. He's not necessarily the player that he was when he left New Orleans, and they're not going to give him the work, the work share that they did at that point either, because Alvin is the guy. There's no doubt
Mm-hmm.
about that. But they, Sean has made it clear over the past few years that he doesn't want to run Alvin into the ground. He doesn't want. He's paying attention to what happens, to what's happening to guys like Christian McCaffrey, to where, listen, man, I mean, they may be able to make something out of running the ball 20 times a game or 30 times a game, but it's not what's best for them over a 17 and now an 18 game schedule and years down the line. You got to protect them, especially if you have plans on making a playoff run and beyond. So and there were times throughout this year to begin the year where it just they were doing that with Alvin, running him 20 times into nothing. And it's like it's not. You have to find other creative ways to get him the football, but they didn't have other options. The other running backs that were there either weren't any good or couldn't stay healthy. Mark comes back, and you're able to see some of the things from 3 years ago. The flexibility and just the added presence of having, even if he's not, even if he's not a starting caliber running back anymore, he's a pretty good number two, and he fits well, knows the system, knows his role, knows how to play, is accepting of it. It was a really good fit. So, I think the goal should continue to use Kamara out the backfield as a catcher, as a runner, but limit his touches. Because I mean, look, and it was actually a blessing in disguise for him. He missed about a month, throughout the year, and more than likely, some of that has to do with a high workload. I think he's capable of it, but there's been in past years dating to the playoffs where he just wasn't the same guy because of what his body had to go through throughout the year just to get to that area. That's another reason why you need added talent outside of these guys, because Alvin's a special talent. You don't want to wreck that. You don't want to be putting him in situations where a workload is impacting his ability to be on the field.
Absolutely. And what makes him so good? Is it kind of his vision? Obviously, catching out of the backfield. I mean, what really kind of makes him as good as he is?
Balance and timing, man. I mean, he knows exactly when to make the right move, the right cut in the right situation. He knows when to run out of bounds. He knows when it's a good time to take a hit and when it's not a good time to take a hit. And for a guy that doesn't, that's not that big, man. He's strong. Strong legs, strong core. But think about, there's so many different plays where you watch Alvin where the first guy just doesn't take him down, or the second guy, or the third guy. And he makes a living out of those plays where it's just his core strength. He works. He dedicates himself in the offseason to working, in unique ways, working on his core and working on his overall balance, because that's what separates him. He's not he's not a speedster, right? I mean, he's quick, in some areas, and he can definitely make some guys miss, but we're not talking about a Saquon Barkley type of athlete here. Alvin's balance, his vision, his knowledge, the way that they end up using him, his hands out of the backfield, his ability to make people miss at one simple speed and not overuse himself, I think is what separates him. And just the way that Sean Payton uses him, right? I mean, we saw Darren Sproles come to New Orleans and make a Pro Bowl team, have his best year, of his career. Sean opened up an entire, Reggie Bush broke a record as, catching the ball out the backfield as a running back when he arrived to New Orleans, right? And Sean has been really good with running backs. There's been a lot of them: Pierre Thomas, Chris Ivory. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the list goes on and on of guys that have went other places and had some type of success. So Alvin fits in there, but he's also very unique in the way that he's able to, keep plays alive, extend them, and then take it to another level. Really good, in the way that he runs blocks. He runs behind blocks, runs behind his pass. I think the technical aspect and the work that he does in the off season is what kind of separates him. How he takes care of himself and his body. Um, the highlights aren't going to wow people consistently, but he's special, man.
Yeah, I mean, what was that? Was that 5 touchdowns? Not this year or last year. Crazy.
Minnesota, yeah.
Yeah, and when you look at him and Derrick Henry, I mean, is Derrick Henry 1A and Alvin Kamara maybe 1B, or is it close there?
I mean, man. To be honest, bro. I mean, there's a lot of guys you can throw up there. I mean,
Yeah.
If Dalvin Cook can stay on the field, he's another
Mm-hmm.
guy that I would throw in there. When Nick Chubb is right, he's another
Oh
guy
yeah.
that I think is there if he catches, when he catches the ball out the backfield. Um, I mean, I don't know what Christian McCaffrey is going to look like, but when he returns, but that's, of course, he's always worthy of the discussion. But I mean, for me, pound for pound, I do think Derrick Henry is definitely the best running back in the game. But I think Alvin is right there. But again, you could make that argument for a lot of other guys. If you tell me Dalvin Cook's better than Alvin, I won't take that away from you. You know what I mean? If you tell me, that you'd rather have Nick Chubb, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I can understand that. But Alvin, his ability to impact the game in multiple ways, especially with the uncertainty of Christian McCaffrey, I think it puts him on a different, just at a different level. Um, and if he's not 1B, I mean, he's not that far down at 2 or 3. I mean, I think running back wise, for me, it's Henry, and then it's some mixture of Dalvin Cook, Alvin, and then from there maybe you go Chubb, McCaffrey, and then there's some other question marks depending on how they are. I mean, I thought Zeke would be a guy that would continue to extend an elite run. It doesn't seem for that to be the case anymore. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely top 3.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And speaking of, it sounds like you're happy with Sean Payton, but, maybe some people aren't. At what point, have you heard, fans maybe saying, is it time for him to retire, move on, or, what is the kind of the temperature, of Saints fans and media there regarding Sean Payton?
I mean, look, like Saints fans are temperamental, like any fan base. When he makes the right call, I mean, he's great. Listen, he's fiery, he's petty, like a lot of people are in this city. So we can appreciate that. He's active on Twitter. So Sean's like, he's an everyday coach, but he can also be grumpy after losses. Maybe some fans feel like he could take more accountability for some things that don't go well. There's questionable play calls. That happens with every coach. I mean,
Mhm.
nobody's perfect, but I mean, he's stamped in the city. Like, I mean, there's no. I don't see anybody asking him to retire. I think that there was
Mhm.
maybe a period where there was maybe a period in time where the Saints were consistently 7-9, 8-8, 7-9, 8-8, to where maybe you were like, okay, maybe it's time for them to go in a different direction and really break things down. The run is over. The honeymoon period is gone. But then they have one of the best draft classes of all time, and then they open up an entire new window in future. So he's one bad call away from being back in another Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
some heartbreaks that have happened, outside of that, that don't involve anything that he had to do with it, right? Through the defense and whatever, but then this year, beyond his control. One thing about Sean, man, is that he continues to make the best of what he has in front of him. and from coordinators to assistants, he's figured out some things. So no, I don't think, especially with this roster, I think that if you can have Sean Payton back, I mean, as long as he wants to be a Saint, unless it's just clear that he's just fell off the wagon and it's time, and we're talking about a team that's 3-12, and we're watching him lose them games consistently. If it's a situation where, and we know who those coaches are, right? We see him every Sunday.
There's
Sean,
the one that coaches the Cowboys.
Yep. I mean, you're a Bears fan, right? You see, right? So,
absolutely.
We're not, no, man. We're like, the Saints have been blessed, and for those that are old enough like me to remember where they've come from as an organization, I'm not ready to move on from Sean anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's interesting, when you talk about the head coach in the NFL. I mean, there's a lot of pressure, but there's something to say just about longevity. You don't, with the right kind of franchises, don't move on after 2 years. Don't I mean, talk about the Jaguars. Just kind of making just not the right decisions. I mean, you really, whether it's the Bears or any franchise, you want to kind of be that franchise that's going to have a just longevity. You have to have a system. You have to have a coach that's there for a while. I mean, you look at what the Steelers, Mike Tomlin, I mean, he is stamped, Pittsburgh there, and Pittsburgh has that history of sticking with their coaches, and obviously the Saints, with Peyton winning the Super Bowl, I think that was huge, and just being in contention. As a Bears fan, I would love to have that, be able to. I just would.
And look, I don't. I mean, again, man, like I'm very aware of of how. I mean, look, some fans are spoiled, man, but I remember how bad this organization used to be, man. I remember the days before Sean Payton. Some fans don't. You know what I'm saying? So, and I look around the landscape of the league and see the different, the teams that are firing coaches every year and bringing in new, every 2 years there's someone new in it. Nobody, you don't want to be a part of that. I mean, if you're blessed to have one of the, a guy that has a Hall of Fame resume, in my perspective, people would love to have Sean Payton. If you're asking him to retire, you don't think the Bears fan would be like, yeah, okay, no, we'll take that guy. The Cowboys would be like, Mike can get out of here. The Cowboys have been on Sean's tail for for a very long time now. So I mean, the list goes on and on. There will be countless number of teams that will be lining up at the at the fence, not lining up at Airline Drive to have a guy like Sean Payton and what he brings as a mind, experience, history, things he can pull from, and what his overall resume. So. Yeah, man. You don't take that for granted unless there's a clear regression and there's an overall change that needs to take place.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Bears, tried to kind of, replicate that by getting Ryan Pace, through Mickey Loomis and everything, and it didn't quite work. I don't know whether Pace wasn't ready, or there's just a lot of things about him, but a lot of it's not getting the coach or the quarterback right as well, and that's going to be an interesting question, obviously, for the Saints. If they don't get the quarterback right this year, where might they be in 2023?
Right. I mean, if you don't get it right, then then at that point, I don't know, because they can eventually, right? Cam Jordan's a year older. DeMario Davis is a year older. You're gonna have future contracts, that you have to look at. Michael Thomas, I believe, is 30 by then. Like, the roster, that one roster, they had a good mixture of youth and veterans, is now a lot older. There's now you now have guys, you need next draft classes to be stepping in and taking over from for maybe some guys that that have regressed or haven't turned into what you thought they would be. I mean, I really can't give you the answer to that. I mean, I think that they've set a standard in what they're trying to do. And I think that this is the year. For some people, this was always the year in which, or this offseason was always going to be the important year, because it was clear that they weren't getting Russell. It was clear that they didn't have many other options outside of Jameis, and it just made the most sense with him being in-house for a year because it's what people thought the plan was supposed to be for Teddy Bridgewater, and maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Some people thought Taysom was going to be that guy, but yeah, I mean, they got a chance to see what they had and get enough on film, and now they got to make a move here. You know, and it's interesting you bring up the Bears. You know, the Bears situation with Ryan Pace. You guys might be going through a familiar situation with Jeff Ireland and Dennis Allen, man. So it's
Oh,
just,
right.
I mean, I would hope you guys don't look to deplete our organization again, but that's okay, man.
You know, and you kind of look at the organization, and I mean, I guess as a Bears fan, I just do not trust. I mean, there's been several, news conferences where I don't trust the ownership. The owner of the Bears said he's not a football guy, but then he's making these choices. It's just, I don't know if you saw that. It was just a mess.
No, but that's terrible.
That's horrible, horrible. And as soon as like there was optimism when they fired Nagy for about a couple hours, and then they had the press conference, and just Chicago sports radio just went nuts, and so when you look at kind of ownership, I mean, do you trust ownership for the Saints?
Yeah, I mean, because look, I mean, they've number one, you've established a fan base, a quote unquote culture, or you've established consistency. You've shown that you've been able to build a winner. The original owner, Tom Benson, passed away. You moved on to Gail Benson and company, and they haven't missed any steps. I mean, we're talking about a franchise that's been here for over 50 years. Yeah, you do trust ownership because it's a little different when it comes to Chicago, and New Orleans, because I mean, New Orleans is a small city, right? Chicago's a large city that's they're used to winning one way or another. Like most people are used to winning in some form of fashion because you have so many different ways in which you can do it. There's a different level of expectation that's there.
Right.
The Saints don't come from that. So maybe now as an organization they're building that, but they don't come from that. And the market size isn't the same either. So what you care about ownership in regards to New Orleans is you care about having this team here as long as possible because you know how much it matters. If there's inconsistency beyond that, you deal with that when you can. There's always going to be a football team in Chicago. The Bears are never leaving. They'll move to Arlington Heights or wherever, but you know what I mean. You never have to worry about that. Now the football side of things, people that get it. I mean, you're going to make a lot of money, owning a Chicago team. That's a different kind of battle, which I understand how frustrating it can be.
That is a great point. Yeah, I mean, when you look at even the Saints, I have had a chance to visit down there a couple of times, and had a chance with a group to help out after Katrina and help some and clean up and whatnot, and it really is connected to the city, and even the rebuilding the city after that. It's just but with the Bears, it is obviously it's they're kind of woven into the city, but you're right, it's only a piece of it. It's not the whole identity. I mean,
Yeah,
you don't look at the Pelicans probably in the same way as you do the Saints.
like everybody in the city's a Saints fan. A girl, I mean, a woman, man, it doesn't matter, young, old. Everybody's a Saints fan, or they know of something, right? It's not like you just know everybody's a Saints fan. Chicago, they may be okay. No, I'm more of a Blackhawks fan, really, or I mean, I'm more Bulls, but yeah, I'm Bears, or no, I'm a diehard Cubs fan, or I'm a diehard White Sox fan.
Yeah.
In New Orleans, it's you're a Saints fan. It's just and they're everywhere. There's Saints bars. There's Saints. I mean, every crime goes down in the city when the Saints win, man. Like seriously, like they mean that much.
Yeah. So you said and you are living in Chicago, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so you get do you listen to kind of Chicago sports radio, or where do you get your kind of Saints connections as well?
I mean, in all honesty, Twitter, man. I mean, I
Yeah.
used to listen to to some to to Chicago radio, a lot of Tom Waddle and Sylvie, and company. I did that a lot maybe 10 years ago because it was
Mhm.
just, it was at that time technology wasn't where it is today, the way you can listen to wherever you want to, right? Or
Yep.
whatever you want to. But between podcasts, man, and Twitter and just the people that I have ran into or know or follow or they follow me, you're never short in this world of being able to connect with somebody no matter where you live at. That's just the advancement of social media and connections in total. So I mean, if there's anything that I feel like I'm missing out, I'm at one touch of a button. I'll be able to find it.
Yeah, I tell you what, and the reason I started doing these is because I feel like I learn more about people who are doing podcasts or focusing on specific teams as opposed to the national media because there's doesn't seem to be enough kind of time to really devote. I mean, to each team, and so this is I definitely appreciate you coming on.
I mean, not a problem, man. Yeah, I mean that people, national media. I mean, it's sometimes it's hard to keep up with one team, man.
Mhm.
So to give any type of impression that you're keeping up, well, in the NFL with all 32, it's just ridiculous, man. But I like what you're doing, man. I'm glad that
Shit, yeah.
that there are things like this that are given a different perspective to that each franchise deserves because we all have there's something that I could learn from someone who watched every Detroit Lions game, every Bears game, every Vikings game. Like I haven't. So and I think every fan base deserves to have someone who is dialed in that manner speak for them. And give it to some, give it on a platform that's, being associated with thousands of people. It's good content.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, we'll definitely have to. I'd love to connect again. Kind of draft time. I mean, that's always kind of a good time to see. I mean, you got all these mock drafts, and I don't really. I mean, I'll look at one, but you just never know after the first few picks.
Right.
Everyone's kind of guessing and whatnot. And when you look at the Saints, I mean, do you think obviously they have to go wide receiver, or are they going to have where are they going to go?
I think wide receiver, but look, I
Yeah.
mean, I mentioned Marcus Williams earlier. There's a situation where they're moving on there. Maybe they go and add for another defense, another weapon in the secondary. Maybe it's a situation where they, Teron Armstead has who is often has unfortunately been often injured, but when he's upright, it's still been one of the best left tackles in football. They have a decision to make there, for him. There's a lot of places that would pay him big money, given even with his injury history, based on the talent alone. Will they move forward with him? Can they afford to move forward with him? Or maybe they have to go and draft another tackle. There's a lot of places that they could go. But I hope once again that they draft a wide receiver. I'm hoping that's where they go, and we'll see.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting, and it is never a shortage of things to talk about with the NFL, and definitely Saints. And yeah, once again, where can everyone find you again?
Yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter at Impatient Bull. I mean, it's pretty much where I spend most of my time, whether I'm here at my full-time job, whatever the case may be. So, yeah, man, Impatient Bull, and follow all the guys or all the work that comes out with SB Nation and Canal Street Chronicles. And yeah, man, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Well, once again, this has been NFL Outdated Cover 2 series, and thanks again, Chris.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yep, we'll catch you again.